to another episode of Throwing It Back with Sean Farrell. I am Sean Farrell. God is great all the time. All the time, God is great. Jesus Christ died and he rose again. Let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so I saw this article, Basketball Network. My phone isn't ringing off the hook no more. Walt Frazier recalled the harsh reality after Willis Reed traded him from the Knicks. For those of you who may not know, he got traded to Cleveland. Okay? Yeah, he got traded to Cleveland after the 1977 season. Yep. Willis Reed made a brutal executive decision when he shipped Walt Frazier off to the Cavaliers. Watching the New York Knicks make their dominant return to the NBA Finals for the first time in 27 years, where they were attempting to capture their first championship since 1973, it is impossible not to look back at franchise history. The golden era, of course, was powered by Walt Frazier, who carried the franchise to its only two Larry O'Brien trophies. Drafted overall fifth in 1967, a legendary class that produced two men who would shape the league through coaching and executive boardrooms, Pat Riley and Phil Jackson. Frazier proved by just his third season he was one of the premier talents in the league. The Big Apple lived through most of his glamorous basketball days with Clyde running the point. That's why the entire city was left paralyzed by shock when his former teammate, newly minted general manager Willis Reed, traded him to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Yikes. I was preparing myself for retirement, Frazier said in the interview with Anscape. I was reading self-help books, something I would have never done if I stayed in New York. It turned out to be a blessing, but I was devastated when I got traded. So, after Walt Frazier left, they had a guy by the name of Jim Clemens. Yes, that Jim Clemens, Chicago Bulls assistant coach Jim Clemens, running the Knicks. Reed showed zero sentiment toward Frazier. While the seven-time All-Star can look back today and view the departure from New York as a blessing in disguise, he couldn't fathom wearing another franchise's uniform at the time, let alone that the trigger would be pulled by the very man he won two championships alongside with. Reed, who claimed Finals MVP honors in both of those championship runs, had enjoyed the rare luxury of playing his entire career for a single franchise, even as injuries caused a severe late career decline. 1971, 1972, 1974. Yeah. At the time of the trade, he showed zero sentimentality toward Frazier, a move that the 6'4" guard took deeply to heart. It took me about 7 or 8 years, Frazier said. I didn't follow the game after I retired. I was trying to adjust to life. The biggest thing I found was I had to control my ego. My phone isn't ringing off the hook no more, and the Knicks had moved on to the next Clyde. Unfortunately, the next Clyde turned out to be Jim Clemens, who was nowhere near Clyde Frazier, the talent that Clyde Frazier was, okay? So, yeah. Overnight, Clyde's life flipped completely. He went from playing under the bright lights of the Mecca as his most vibrant, untouchable superstar to being treated like an expendable salary cap filler. At the time of the trade, Frazier held Knicks franchise records for most games, 759, minutes played, nearly 29,000, 28,995, field goals attempted, 11,669, field goals made, 5,736, free throws attempted, 4,017, free throws made, 3,145, assists, 4,791, and points, 14,617. Patrick Ewing eventually rewrote most of those record books, but Frazier's assist record still stands untouched. Though Frazier had begun battling minor injuries, his younger replacement in New York, Jim Clemens, never came close to reaching his legendary heights. a clear sign that Reed may have gotten way ahead of himself as a front office executive. Ultimately, Frazier's deep-rooted love for New York prevailed. After his playing days, he transitioned into broadcasting, where he currently serves as the iconic color commentator for the Knicks telecast along Madison Square Garden Network, also alongside the legendary Mike Breen. Okay. Okay. So, the Knicks traded Frazier as compensation for acquiring free agent playmaker Jim Clemens from the Cavaliers. So essentially, he was traded for Jim Clemens. Okay. Ironically, at the time, Frazier had 3 years left on this contract. Okay. Yeah, he had 3 years left on his contract, so he could have played with New York through 1980. Okay, but Willis Reed, yeah. Frazier's tenure in Cleveland was brief and largely hampered by lingering foot injuries. He played only 66 games for the Cavaliers over parts of 3 seasons before being waived just 3 games into the 1979-80 season, shortly, which after he retired. So he says this in the New York Knicks documentary, When the Garden Was Eden. He said when he was traded to Cleveland, it was like he got shot. And then he reverted from Clyde Frazier back to being Walt Frazier. Okay. In New York, he was Clyde Frazier. But he said going to Cleveland, it was like he got shot and reverted back to Walt Frazier. Okay, so yeah. And at the time he got traded, Earl Monroe was still on the team. So that duo could have been together through 1980 because Earl Monroe retired after the 1980 season. Okay, but yeah. So Willis Reed, man, he was a Knicks executive at that time, general manager, and man, guess that was one of Willis Reed's first big moves, right? Yeah. Eventually, he ended up being coach of the Nets. Willis Reed was an assistant coach in Sacramento. With Bill Russell. He ended up co-coaching the Nets, yeah, for a few years. Kenny Smith tells his story. I'll end it right here. Kenny Smith tells his story about Bill Russell and Willis Reed, okay? He tells a story of how when Kenny Smith was a rookie in 1988, he says Bill Russell made him sit at the front of the bus. He says, why? Then Bill Russell pointed out, he said, you know what, he's a loser, and they'll never win. And so then LaSalle Thompson, who played for the Kings back then, before joining the Pacers, said, what are you doing? You can't call all these guys losers. What are you doing? And then Kenny Smith continued to tell the story. He was like, I'm trying to trade him. And so then Kenny Smith said that playing for Bill Russell was a keep it real head coach, okay? And so he also tells his story. He said Bill Russell didn't run practice. Bill Russell never ran practice that much. He said Willis Reed would run the practices, okay? And he said this is where it gets funny, okay? Well, Willis Reed would run the practices, okay? And Bill Russell would read the paper, okay? And the players were noticing that while Bill Russell was reading the paper, he would be like, and so then when Bill Russell dozed off and sort of like fell off, the players started laughing about it. And then Kenny Smith tells us a story. He's like, Bill Russell was like, that's it. Everybody out of practice. If y'all weren't so damn boring, I wouldn't even be usually heaping. So then Kenny Smith said he threw us out of practice for being boring. Okay. Yeah. All right, that's it, and that's all for Throw Back with Sean Farrell. I am out of here. Peace out.